Hi everyone, Mark Brownlee back here at MyEngineerExchange.com, and we're dealing with Engineers Australia Stage 2 competencies. Number 1, deal with ethical issues. So you've probably seen the video, you may have downloaded the top 10 tips. Hopefully you have. If you haven't, get on, do that. That's all nice, but we're engineers, so what do we like? Toolkits. So we've created this little toolkit for you. It's a little simple 2x2 matrix which will be able to steer your ethical decision making well into the future. It's a cool little tool that I use all the time. We're going to take you through the thinking, and then if you hit the download button below, it's all yours. Enjoy. So before we get to the tool, which you'll be able to download below, just hit the download button and it'll be a neat little 2x2 matrix that you can hang on to and use for all your ethical decision making into the future. What I wanted to do was just set it up for you, so you know where we're coming from and how we actually get to the point of creating this neat little tool for you. To succeed in the practice of ethics, you're going to need 3 reference, or what I call anchor points. They are a moral compass, that's the internal reference point, a reasonable person, that's the external reference point, and the environment within which you make ethical decisions or deal with ethical issues. And that is in the sunshine. You've heard me say before that sunshine is the best disinfectant when it comes to dealing with ethical dilemmas. Transparency and openness is what ethical decision making is all about. When it comes to the moral compass, we've actually all got one of these. It's inbuilt, just like the iPhone. The reasonable person, it's about identifying someone in your circle, a trusted confidant that is independent of your engineering practice. And the question that you're going to ask, the test if you like, is what would the woman on the Bondi tram do? There's Millie. Millie is a reasonable person. We'll come back to her. And of course, sunshine, as I said, that's the place that you want to make all these ethical decisions out in the open. So 3 reference or anchor points: 1 internal, moral compass; 1 external, the reasonable person, and the environment within which you make ethical decisions or deal with ethical issues, which is sunshine. So these ethical anchors that I talk about have foundations. And the first point I want to make before we come on to those is that the 3 anchor points I've discussed, there's an and condition that applies. It's not an or condition. So you need a moral compass, and you need a reasonable person, and you need some sunshine. So all 3 of these are required to ensure that you can progress to an ethical outcome, whatever dilemma you are facing. So on the moral compass side of things, as I said, everyone's got one of these, and it's available to us to guide our engineering practice. But when it comes to compasses, there's a true north and a magnetic north. And ultimately, it's our magnetic north that is unreliable. We always need a fixed datum or reference point, and that will be true north. So I'll come back to that in a minute. When it comes to the reasonable person, as I said, they need to be independent from your engineering practice. Colloquially, they're known as the woman on the Bondi tram, the woman on the Burke Street tram, or the woman on the Clapham omnibus over there in the UK. Either way, they're independent and they use risk aversion and common sense to make decisions. So the first test will be against your own internal moral compass. The second test will be against what the reasonable person would have to say about your ethical dilemma. And as I always say, secrecy and ethics are mutually exclusive. So transparency underpins ethical dealings in all cases. So that moral compass of yours, true north, is a fixed point on the Earth's surface. It is a static datum. Engineers like datums. We like static datums in the case of ethics. And true north is all about our values, our beliefs, and our integrity. It's a fixed point. Magnetic north, as I said, is unreliable because of its deviation. That compass that you've got, that moral compass, the one that's internal, needs to be calibrated. And the best way of doing that is to be clear about your values and belief system. And what I'd encourage you to do is to sit down and articulate those, write them down, and be able and reference them as you go, so that you can continually test your ethical dilemmas against that internal value-based system. The Engineers Australia Code of Conduct is also a great resource, and I'd encourage you to head to that as well. So the test you should be applying to ethical decision making when it comes to the use of your internal moral compass is alignment and consistency with those values and beliefs that you hold. Now remember, this is a binary situation. You are either going to be ethical in your dealings or you are not. This is not an analog solution. And again, I refer you back to the Engineers Australia Code of Ethics. And this is actually what it looks like. This true north, this fixed datum, you can see it there. That is a fixed point on the Earth's surface. The magnetic pole is where the Earth's magnetic field actually points downward, and there is deviation or variance between the two. It is the North Pole that must guide us in all ethical dealings. Why? Because the North Pole doesn't move, the magnetic North Pole does. So the geographic one is the one we want. If you think about your practice as a professional engineer, the magnetic North Pole really references culture, experience, and observation. So you could be an engineer working in a toxic culture, in a dud organisation. You could be observing the behaviour of scoundrels or unethical people. That means your magnetic North Pole is not going to be reliable when it comes to ethical decision making. However, if that decision making of yours references a fixed point, the geographic North Pole as we talk about it, then it will be guided by what I call the rule of law, the values and beliefs that you hold dear, and what is right. And that is why we focus on true north. Rule of law, values and beliefs, what is right, they are the things that will help you decide whether what you're about to do meets the ethical criteria expected of a professional engineer. Now back to Millie, this reasonable person. So we've tested our thinking and our ethical dilemma against our internal moral compass. This is the external test. This is the reasonable person. So as I said, that reasonable person is a hypothetical or legal construct. They are independent of your engineering practice. So Millie's not involved. She's not in your team. She doesn't work for your organisation necessarily. She's probably, as I said, on the Bondi tram, the Burke Street tram, or the Clapham omnibus. But the thing about Millie is that she is conscious of risk, at least, and probably slightly risk averse. They're the people you want to put your ethical dilemmas to. And it's a means of objectifying a legal test. So in courts, they will talk about the test that a reasonable person would apply. In political circles, it's often called the pub test, what a group of people in the pub might think if you took your ethical dilemma to them. But ultimately, what we're asking you to do is refer that ethical dilemma to Millie. So the test you should apply is, what would Millie do, given that she applies a risk bias and common sense? It's that simple. So we've got our internal test against our own moral compass, guided by rule of law and our values and belief systems. And we've got our external test when we ask Millie, what would she do in the situation that we find ourselves in? And when you put all that together, here's the little tool that you can download, take away, and continually refer to. Now I'm going to start with the two easy areas. You can see a little 2x2 matrix that we've constructed for you there. And these are where your internal moral compass and the views of an external reasonable person are aligned. These are the easy ones. So if we get down to the bottom left-hand corner, you can see a reasonable person would reject or abandon your proposed course of action when faced with an ethical dilemma. And your moral compass also says, no, don't proceed. So in that case, you're staying faithful to your values and beliefs and the Engineers Australia Code of Ethics, and a reasonable person would arrive at the same conclusion. In that case, do not proceed. If you do, your reputation is at stake and you may well find yourself a customer of law enforcement agencies, which is where you do not want to be. If we head up to the top right-hand quadrant, you will also see a proceed with caution. So this is where a reasonable person says, yep, that sounds fine to me, off you go. And that's where your internal moral compass also says, yep, I think you can go ahead with that decision. So again, we've created alignment. But what I'd encourage you to do is carefully evaluate and document your decision and the criteria you've used, and always make your decision making transparent. And of course, you must declare any conflicts of interest. So they're the easy ones. That's where we get total alignment between your internal moral compass and the external reasonable person criteria. The tricky areas are what I call the recalibrate and reconsider quadrant. So if we go to the top left, you'll see recalibrate. This is where your internal compass says, yes, I can proceed when presented with an ethical dilemma. And the reasonable person is saying, hang on, this is a course of action you should abandon. Now, if that is the case, what I then encourage you to do immediately is stop and discuss the situation with a trusted and independent confidant, because it would appear to me that your moral compass may need some recalibration based on a reasonable criteria that independent person like Millie is applying. You don't want to find yourself in a situation where you're compromised. So if a reasonable person wouldn't go ahead, neither should you. In the first instance, you should sit down and discuss that situation with a trusted and independent confidant. When it comes to reconsider, this is a situation where a reasonable person is saying, yes, you may proceed, go for it. It seems to pass all the reasonable ethical tests, but there's something inside your moral compass that is not quite right. So your moral compass is saying, no, that's a course of action that you should abandon. So the reasonable and moral criteria are out of alignment. This is where caution is required. What I would encourage you to do is also to stop and explore your moral compass settings again with a trusted person that is independent of the work that you are doing. In this particular case, I always encourage you to defer to your moral compass and not the reasonable person. So even though the reasonable person may be saying proceed, and ultimately that may be the track that you take, because your moral compass is saying it's a course of action you should abandon, you should listen to that compass and seek external guidance. So with that little tool, which you can download below, you can put every ethical dilemma you will face as a young professional engineer to the test, and hopefully it will give you some good guidance as to which direction you should go. And finally, as I always say, looking out across Port Phillip Bay from a beautiful little spot on the Mornington Peninsula called Capel Sound, I would encourage you to conduct all of your dealings. In fact, I insist as a young engineer, and even an experienced engineer for that matter, all of your ethical dealings are conducted in public. Sunshine is always the best disinfectant, and it will keep you safe. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening. So that's our cool little tool. Hope you enjoyed the presentation. Hope you've downloaded it. Stick with it. It'll see you through ethical decision making well into the future. And most importantly, it's going to keep you safe. And that's what matters to us.